we are going to go live, and then let me close all tabs, open. Om Ajnana Timira Dasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitamyena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Sva Padantikam. Namavam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine. So reading from Lila Amruta, as you see it on the screen, it is available online as well, but we have our Lila Amruta books given out freely available on the appearance of and the arrival day of Prabhupada, or if you want it, we can get it earlier also. The printed copy we have comes in 7 small books. These 2 volumes are a little bulky, but the current print is a little smaller. So we'll be starting from volume 1. This is written by His Holiness Bhakti Satswarup Das Maharaj, Satswarup Das Maharaj. So, and he also writes in the acknowledgements many of the other senior Vaishnavas involved. So some of them we know is Bhakti Charu Maharaj or Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu, Jadurani Mataji, Jai Advaita Maharaj, Jai Patak Maharaj, Mukunda Maharaj, Mukunda Goswami Maharaj, and so on. So with that, we will start reading from the introduction. So we will all take turn. Like usually I follow the order that displays on the screen, but I'm also doubting not everyone is ready to read. Any case, we'll all take turns at 15-minute turns. If any one of you ready to read, please raise your hand, so then we can pass it to each other. Okay. Thank you so much for your gracious presence. It is very little bit inspiring and heart-touching. So looking forward. With that, we will start our reading. Introduction. From childhood, Srila Prabhupada worshipped Lord Krishna, understanding him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of all existence. And beginning at age 22, after his first meeting with his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada became more and more active in spreading the teachings of Lord Krishna. In Srila Prabhupada Lila Amrita Volume 1, we see Srila Prabhupada struggling alone to publish Back to Godhead magazine, personally typing, editing, visiting the printer, and then distributing the copies on the streets of New Delhi. Working alone in Jhansi, India, Prabhupada gathered a few part-time followers to create the League of Devotees, an early attempt to enact his vision of introducing people from all nations, races, and levels of society to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada was still alone as he arrived in America in 1965. But he was filled with faith in Krishna and determination to establish Krishna consciousness in the West and thus fulfill the desire of his spiritual master and the prediction of the scriptures and previous saints. Young men and women on New York's Lower East Side joined, attracted not so much to the Vedic culture as to Swamiji and his chanting of Hare Krishna. Thus, beginning from a small storefront, Srila Prabhupada introduced the Hare Krishna movement to America. We follow Srila Prabhupada to San Francisco's Haight Ashbury during the hippie heyday of 1967, as he establishes his Krishna conscious movement there, just as he had done in New York City. Then, in May of 67, he appeared to suffer a heart attack and retired to India to recuperate. It became even clearer that the Krishna consciousness movement, its life and its growth depended entirely upon him. Although a few dozen sincere workers were dedicated to his service, they felt helpless and incompetent to do any missionary work or even to maintain their own spiritual vows to abstain from illicit sex, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling, unless he were personally present to lead them. In December 1967, Srila Prabhupada returned to America again and his young spiritual family. As Srila Prabhupada would comment several years later, his movement did not really begin until this return to America in December 1967. His time was limited. He knew the heart attack had proven that. Now, in whatever time was left, he had to accomplish his mission. And as his International Society for Krishna Consciousness began to grow, it gradually spread beyond its simple and sometimes humorous beginnings to become a spiritual institution considered noteworthy even among world religions. In the present volume, we follow Srila Prabhupada through the years of his great active participation in ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, as its sole leader. 1968, Srila Prabhupada has approximately 50 disciples and 6 ISKCON centers. Although his followers have increased their numbers, most of them are no more than sincere neophytes. Prabhupada is personally available to each of his disciples, and he continues to manage and maintain each ISKCON center. Then, in July of 1970, Srila Prabhupada formed, someone is unmuted. In 1970, Srila Prabhupada forms his governing body commission and begins to turn over ISKCON's management to his board of GBC secretaries. Yet, we find Srila Prabhupada still actively guiding the activities of his society, expanded by 1971 to 600 disciples and 65 centers. In 1968, he has 50 disciples and 6 centers. In 3 years, it grows to 600 disciples and 65 centers. 50 disciples, basically 10 times. Although the teachings of Krishna consciousness have existed since time immemorial within India's Sanskrit Vedic literatures and are the origin and the essence of all religious expression, until Srila Prabhupada began his preaching, Krishna consciousness in its original purity had never been widely spread. In the most popular and basic Vedic text, Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna teaches that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and that real religion, real knowledge, and real endeavor can be understood only when one dedicates his life to the loving service of the Lord. Only full surrender to the Supreme Being can bring one freedom from the loss of karma and the cycle of repeated birth and death. Srila Prabhupada was convinced that devotional service to Lord Krishna is life's goal, and that to engage others in devotional service is the highest welfare activity. And these convictions drove him in his traveling and preaching on behalf of his spiritual master and Krishna. Srila Prabhupada's success in spreading Krishna consciousness was due to his being directly empowered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Kali Kalera Dharma, Krishna Nama Sankirtana, Krishna Sakti Vina, Nahe Tari Pravartana. The fundamental religious system in the age of Kali is a chanting of the holy names of Krishna. Unless empowered by Krishna, one cannot propagate the Sankirtan movement. Yet, although Srila Prabhupada was empowered, his life story is not one in which success comes neatly and automatically, everything being miraculously enacted by God. Rather, Srila Prabhupada's story is one of constant attempts on behalf of his spiritual master. Successes come, but only after great endeavor and faith. Prabhupada encountered difficulties in trying to spread love of God in a godless world. He sometimes met opposition from governments, the media, religionists, including those in India. And even within his own society, he met difficulties caused when his neophyte disciples fell to the allurements of the material world. Yet, through all difficulties, Srila Prabhupada persevered with a sublime tolerance, kindness, and unflinching determination of a pure devotee of Lord Krishna. By material standards, it's extraordinary that a person of Srila Prabhupada's age could constantly travel, confront problems and opposition, and simultaneously produce volume after volume of translated Vedic literatures. But material vision cannot comprehend Srila Prabhupada's activities. He was truly a Mahatma, as described by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. The Mahatmas are always working under the direction of my internal energy. In spreading Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada was far from merely a religious zealot trying to increase a sect. His writing, traveling, and preaching were done in pure devotion to Lord Krishna and were therefore transcendental. It was Krishna himself, Srila Prabhupada saw, who was bringing the results. Lord Chaitanya said, Prithiviti achayata nagaradi grama sarvatar prachara habe mora nama. Every town and village, the chanting of my name will be heard. These words directly spoken by Lord Chaitanya are certainly true. The Lord's prediction must come to pass. Many Gaudiya Vaishnavas, however, even as recently as the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, considered the Lord's prediction problematic. The name of Lord Chaitanya in every town and village, should this be taken allegorically? Suddenly, Americans, Europeans, Africans, Polynesians, and Mongolians, the uncultured Malaches outside of India, could never become Vaishnavas. Thus, Lord Chaitanya's words had seemed an enigmatic topic for speculation. Srila Prabhupada, however, was under the orders from his spiritual master Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to preach Krishna consciousness beyond India. And alone in 1965, he took the great step and left India, crossed the Atlantic, and began the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in New York City. I'll stop here. I'll say quickly, just in a minute or two, whatever I read or whatever the highlights for me. It's very exciting that we are going to know the about Prabhupada from his childhood, from the next chapter, and especially Satswarup Maharaj was emphasizing how he started alone and the path is not straightforward. Yes, he was, it is certainly not possible whatever Srila Prabhupada did without Krishna's empowerment. But his quality is that he persisted, and he did on behalf of his spiritual master. He did for Krishna, and so much so the numbers simply changed. As Satswarup Maharaj was narrating, he had disciples, but having disciples did not slow down the problems. There are also problems because of the young disciples. Obviously, pretty new organization, new movement, and literally Prabhupada managed 6 centers in the beginning. I'm thinking even now he is managing each ISKCON center. So that's my appreciation to Srila Prabhupada with fondness. Anyone want to read from here? Okay, Shatrupa is taking. Okay, let me. We need to get ready. Quickly go.
Prabhupada, however, was under orders from his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, to preach Krishna consciousness beyond India. And alone in 1965, he took the great help and left India, crossed the Atlantic, and began the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in New York City. Although some of Prabhupada's godbrothers had gone to England some 30 years before, they had failed to establish anything and had even concluded that to give Krishna consciousness to the Western people was not possible. But Srila Prabhupada, fulfilling Lord Chaitanya's prediction, traveled and employed his disciples in traveling to open centers in New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, Montreal, Buffalo, Seattle. He also sent his disciples abroad to London and other countries, and they succeeded where Prabhupada's godbrothers had failed. As the present volume explains, Srila Prabhupada traveled not only to enlist new devotees and establish Krishna consciousness in new places around the world, but also to maintain what he had already begun. Had he not continued to travel to each temple, instructing his disciples, observing their progress, correcting their mistakes, raising the standard of their Krishna consciousness, the devotees would not have been able to continue. Repeatedly, Prabhupada had to go around the world. Srila Prabhupada, by his faith in Krishna, by his selfless dedication to the order of his spiritual master, and by the blessings of Lord Chaitanya, did what no one else could have done. As Chaitanya Charitamrita states, Krishna Shakti Bina Nahe Tara Pravartana. Only one empowered by Lord Krishna can actually spread the chanting of Hare Krishna around the world. I thought you read all this, right? I was hearing when I was on the call.
Oh.
So the volume is an account that you just read on?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Okay. This volume is an account of years of struggle and ultimate fulfillment in Srila Prabhupada's life, and I invite the reader to relish them. Here is the rags to riches story of one who started alone with nothing, but whose movement, writing, and personal life created an astounding and permanent impression on the world. By following Srila Prabhupada through these times, we gain an understanding of his exalted and humble life. I am unable to describe Srila Prabhupada fully. I have therefore composed an invocation, praying that I be permitted to tell the story purely from the transcendental viewpoint, otherwise it would be ruined and incomprehensible. When properly told, the life of the pure devotee brings the greatest joy and benefit to the hearers. Invocation. According to Krishnadas Kaviraj, an invocation involves offering obeisances, defining the objective, and
say something the previous one.
bestowing benedictions.
Can you say something on the previous thing so that
Okay.
people will get the context?
Okay. So
Just people.
the request is to just like say something about the previous. So I was just like struck by how Satsvarup Maharaj has written. Actually, one can only imagine how glorious it is when somebody can describe about the spiritual master, and without Srila Prabhupada's disciples in our lives, or I will say it positively, with their association, Srila Prabhupada has become also very much visible to us, very much like, as if we know him in person. Of course, he and his books are nothing different, but still we feel like we have just interacted with him. We have just moved along and seen him because of all these writings. That's one thing that strikes me when reading Lilamrita. And just about Prabhupada, when we just see here, he it's just an amazing journey. It was his faith on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he just proved that that's all one needs to serve Krishna. Intense conviction on spiritual master and Srila Prabhupada, that's all one needs. So that's what I caught from this. And the amount of services that Prabhupada did, it's unimaginable. He was starting new temple and he was maintaining other temples. He was having new disciples and he was also instructing the other experienced disciples, and he was empowering them. And it's one cannot even imagine. So I'm very thrilled to go back and read Prabhupada Lilamrita and just be with Prabhupada. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share. So I'll continue with invocation.
15 minutes after that, 6:30 after the others.
Okay. So I offer my respectful obeisances to my eternal spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, whose service is my life and soul. It is for his pleasure that I offer Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita as an act of devotional service. He has blessed the entire world with Krishna consciousness, and he is therefore the best friend of all people and all living entities. He is the most powerful Acharya, delivering pure love of God, and he is delivering the message of Lord Chaitanya strictly in disciplic succession. No one else has ever spread Krishna consciousness as widely as he. I'm praying that he will allow me to surmount the difficulties involved in presenting his biography, and that he will be pleased with the results. I'm convinced that by his good wishes, this work will be successful, and that if he is not pleased, I am powerless to write anything of merit. By offering obeisances to my spiritual master, I'm offering respects to all other acharyas in the disciplic succession, to Srila Prabhupada's Guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, to his Guru, and so on, to the 6 Goswamis, Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Krishna himself. Only by the grace of Srila Prabhupada can I bow down in the temple, prostrate at the feet of Gaur Nitai, Krishna Balaram, and Radha Shyamasundar, and have access to their mercy. One objective of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita is to present the life and teachings of Srila Prabhupada in the transcendental perspective, never portraying Srila Prabhupada as an ordinary man, subject to the modes of nature. Srila Prabhupada was a divinely empowered pure devotee. He was sent to this world by the Supreme Lord just to spread the Krishna consciousness movement to people of all nations, races, classes, and creeds, and thus to offer everyone the opportunity to become a pure devotee and to go back to Godhead. Another objective of this work is to attract the leaders and influential members of the society to appreciate the love of Srila Prabhupada. This biography must be honest, factual, and correct in transcendental knowledge, and it must captivate and please the reader. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita must enlighten and please, and also move the reader to inquire into the writings of Srila Prabhupada. My ultimate objective is that the reader be further moved to take up service to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Although it's appropriate while writing an invocation to offer benediction to the reader, I am fallen and cannot offer any benedictions. Yet, I can confidently assure my readers that by reading the life and teachings of Srila Prabhupada, they will gain quick access to the mercy of Krishna, because it's only by the mercy of a great devotee that anyone gets the mercy of Krishna. By reading Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, those who associated with and served Srila Prabhupada will refresh their remembrance of him and thus derive ecstasy and rededication to his service. Those who never knew Srila Prabhupada will also be blessed because, according to the Vedic literatures, even a moment's association with a pure devotee can make one's life perfect. To read Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita is to associate with Srila Prabhupada through the transcendental process of hearing. Therefore, although I myself cannot award any benediction to my readers, this work can do so, as it attracts everyone to Srila Prabhupada. Thus, having made the invocation to this work, offering obeisances, describing my objectives, and offering benedictions, I remain fallen and dumb, begging at the lotus feet of my Guru Maharaj and waiting for his mercy, which alone can allow this poor writer and poor devotee to speak well. My dear Srila Prabhupada, my dear Lord Krishna, if you think I can be trusted to write correctly, then please allow me to do so. There is a great need for this transcendental literature, as the human beings of Kali Yuga are in a deplorable state of spiritual blindness, with no knowledge of the relief to be gained by service to a pure devotee. The devotees of the Lord and many sincere followers of Srila Prabhupada are eagerly receiving this work. They want to hear more and more of Srila Prabhupada's activities and instructions, and they want to see them presented expertly so that others may also become attracted to join us in loving, dedicated service to Guru and Gauranga. My dear Srila Prabhupada, I know I have to work hard to produce this literature, and I promise to do so. But my efforts will be only a spinning of concocted empty words unless you become present in these words and bring them to life with transcendental potency. Satsvarup Das Goswami. What can we say about this? I'm just again gaining appreciation for Satsvarup Maharaj actually, because what he said about what is a Mangala Charana or invocation prayers is defining the objective and offering obeisances and awarding benedictions. So these are not just, he did not discover it, it's there in Nectar of Devotion, it's there in every literature. When we see the example just following like this, it really touches me a lot. And the way he put it about Srila Prabhupada being present in the words of Lilamrita, that's why we feel more connection with Srila Prabhupada when we read, because he is present in these words of Satsvarup Maharaj's narration. My heart is just touched. I don't know what else to say.
Anyone online want to take on the reading?
If not, we can continue.
I'll take that. Yeah, you can continue.
Okay.
Take the turn.
I can continue. Yeah. Chapter 1. We would be sleeping and father would be doing arti.
Title.
Chapter 1, Childhood. We would be sleeping, and father would be doing arati. Ding, ding, ding. We would hear the bell and wake up and see him bowing down before Krishna, Srila Prabhupada. It was Janmashtami, the annual celebration of the advent of Lord Krishna, some 5,000 years before. Residents of Kolkata, mostly Bengalis and other Indians, but also many Muslims and even some British, were observing the festive day, moving here and there through the city streets to visit temples of Lord Krishna. Devout Vaishnavas, fasting until midnight, chanted Hare Krishna and heard about the birth and activities of Lord Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam. They continued fasting, chanting, and worshipping throughout the night. The next day, September 1st, 1896, in a little house in the Toliganj suburb of Kolkata, a male child was born. Since he was born on Nandotsava, the day Krishna's father Nanda Maharaj had observed a festival in honor of Krishna's birth, the boy's uncle called him Nandulal. But his father, Gaur Mohan De, and his mother, Rajini, named him Abhay Charan, one who is fearless, having taken shelter at Lord Krishna's lotus feet. In accordance with Bengali tradition, the mother had gone to the home of her parents for the delivery. And so it was that on the bank of the Adi Ganga, a few miles from his father's home, in a small two-room mud-walled house with a tiled roof, underneath a jackfruit tree, Abhay Charan was born. A few days later, Abhay returned with parents to their home at 157 Harrison Road. An astrologer did a horoscope for the child, and the family was made jubilant by the auspicious reading. The astrologer made a specific prediction. When the child reaches the age of 70, he would cross the ocean, become a great exponent of religion, and open 108 temples. Abhay Charan De was born into an India dominated by Victorian imperialism. Kolkata was the capital of India and seat of the viceroy, the Earl of Elgin and Kincherdane, I don't know if I'm pronouncing right, and the second city of the British Empire. Europeans and Indians lived separately, although in business and education they intermingled. The British lived mostly in central Kolkata, amidst their own theaters, racetracks, cricket fields, and fine European buildings. The Indians lived more in North Kolkata. Here, the men dressed in dhotis and women in saris, and while remaining loyal to the British crown, followed their traditional religion and culture. Abhai's home at 157 Harrison Road was in the Indian section of North Kolkata. Abhai's father, Gaur Mohan De, was a cloth merchant of moderate income and belonged to aristocratic Suvarna Vanik merchant community. He was related, however, to the wealthy Malik family, which for hundreds of years had traded in gold and salt with the British. Originally, the Maliks had been members of the De family, a Gotra lineage that traces back to the ancient sage Gautama. But during the Mughal period of pre-British India, a Muslim ruler had conferred the title Malik, Lord, on a wealthy, influential branch of the Des. Then, several generations later, a daughter of Des had married into a Malik family, and the two families had remained close ever since. An entire block of properties on either side of Harrison Road belonged to Loknath Malik, and Gaur Mohan and his family lived in a few rooms of a three-story building within the Malik properties. Across the street from Des residence was the Radha Govinda temple, where, for the past 150 years, the Maliks had maintained worship of the deity of Radha and Krishna. Various shops on the Malik properties provided income for the deity and for the priests conducting the worship. Every morning before breakfast, the Malik family members would visit the temple to see the deity of Radha Govinda. They would offer cooked rice, kachoris, and vegetables on a large platter and would then distribute the prasadam to the deity's morning visitors from the neighborhood. Among the daily visitors was Abhay Charan, accompanying his mother, father, or servant, Srila Prabhupada. I used to ride on the same perambulator with Siddheshwar Malik. He used to call me Moti, Pearl, and his nickname was Subidi. And the servant pushed us together. If one day this friend did not see me, he would become mad. He would not go to the perambulator without me. We would not separate even for a moment. As the servant pushed the baby carriage into the wide expanse of Harrison Road, timing his crossing between the bicycles and horse drawn hackneys, the two children in the pram gazed up at the fair sky and tall trees across the road. Sounds and sights of the hackneys, with their large wheels spinning over the road, caught the fascinated attention of the two children. The servant steered the carriage towards the arched gateway within the red sandstone wall bordering the Radha Govinda Mandir. And as Abhay and his friend rode underneath the ornate metal arch and into the courtyard, they saw high above them two stone lions, the heralds and protectors of the temple compound, their right paws extended. In the courtyard was a circular drive, and on the oval lawn was lampposts with gaslights and a statue of a young woman in robes. Sharply chirping sparrows flitted in the shrubs and trees or hopped across the grass, pausing to peck the ground, while choruses of pigeons cooed, sometimes abruptly flapping their wings overhead, sailing off to another perch or descending to the courtyard. Voices chattered as Bengalis moved to and fro, dressed in simple cotton saris and white dhotis. Someone paused by the carriage to amuse the golden skinned boys with their shining dark eyes, but mostly people were passing by quickly, going into the temple. The heavy double doors leading into the inner courtyard were open, and the servant eased the carriage wheels down a a foot deep step, and proceeded through the foyer, then down another step and into the bright sunlight of the main courtyard. There they faced a stone statue of Garuda perched on a 4-foot column. This carrier of Vishnu, Garuda, half man and half bird, kneeled on one knee, his hands folded prayerfully, his eagle's beak strong, and his wings poised behind him. The carriage moved ahead, past two servants, sweeping and washing the stone courtyard. It was just a few paces across the courtyard to the temple. The temple area itself, open like a pavilion, was a raised platform with a stone roof supported by stout pillars 15 feet tall. At the left end of the temple pavilion stood a crowd of worshippers, viewing the deities on the altar. The servant pushed the carriage closer, lifted the two boys out, and then, holding their hands, escorted them reverentially before the deities. Srila Prabhupada. I can remember standing at the doorway of Radha Govinda temple, saying prayers to Radha Govinda Murti. I would watch for hours together. The deity was so beautiful with his slanted eyes. Radha and Govinda, freshly bathed and dressed, now stood on their silver throne amidst vases of fragrant flowers. Govinda was about 18 inches high, and Radharani standing to his left was slightly smaller. Both were golden. Radha and Govinda both stood in the same gracefully curved dancing pose, right leg bent at the knee and right foot placed in front of the left. Radharani, dressed in lustrous silk sari, held up her reddish right palm in benediction, and Krishna, in his silk jacket and dhoti, played on a golden flute. At Govinda's lotus feet were green tulsi leaves with pulp of sandalwood, hanging around their lordships' necks and reaching down almost to the lotus feet were several garlands of fragrant night blooming jasmine, delicate trumpet like blossoms resting lightly on Radha and Govinda's divine forms. Their necklaces of gold, pearls, and diamonds shimmered. Radharani's bracelets were of gold, and both she and Krishna wore gold embroidered silk chadars about their shoulders. The flowers in their hands and hair were small and delicate, and the silver crowns on their heads were bedecked with jewels. Radha and Krishna were slightly smiling, beautifully dressed, dancing on their silver throne beneath a silver canopy and surrounded by flowers. To Abhay, they appeared most attractive. Life outside on Harrison Road and beyond was forgotten. In the courtyard, the birds went on chirping, and visitors came and went. But Abhay stood silently, absorbed in seeing the beautiful forms of Krishna and Radharani, the Supreme Lord and his eternal consort. Then the kirtan began, devotees chanting and playing on drums and kartals. Abhay and his friend kept watching as the pujari offered incense, its curling smoke hanging in the air. Then a flaming lamp, a conch shell, a handkerchief, flowers, a whisk, and a peacock fan. Finally, the pujari blew the conch shell loudly, and the arati ceremony was over. When Abhay was 1.5 years old, he fell ill with typhoid. The family physician, Dr. Bose, prescribed chicken broth. No, Gaurav Mohan protested. I cannot allow it. Yet, yes, otherwise he will die. But we are not meat eaters, Gaurav Mohan pleaded. We cannot prepare chicken in our kitchen. Don't mind, Dr. Bose said. I shall prepare it at my house and bring it in a jar. And you simply. Gaurav Mohan assented. If it is necessary for my son to live. So the doctor came with his chicken broth and offered it to Abhay, who immediately began to vomit. All right, the doctor admitted. Never mind, this is no good. Gaurav Mohan then threw the chicken broth away, and Abhay gradually recovered from the typhoid without having to eat meat. On the roof of Abhay's maternal grandmother's house was a little garden with flowers, greenery, and trees. Along with the other grandchildren, 2-year-old Abhay took pleasure in watering the plants with a sprinkling can, but his particular tendency was to sit alone amongst the plants. He would find a nice bush and make a sitting place. One day, when Abhay was 3, he narrowly escaped a fatal burning. He was playing with matches in the front of his house when he caught his cloth on fire. Suddenly, a man appeared and put the fire out. Abhay was saved, although he retained a small scar on his leg. In 1900, when Abhay was 4, a vehement plague hit Kolkata. Dozens of people died every day, and thousands evacuated the city. When there seemed no way to check the plague, an old Babaji organized a Hare Krishna Sankirtan all over Kolkata. Regardless of religion, a Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and Parsi all joined, and a large party of chanters traveled from street to street, door to door, chanting the names Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The group arrived at Gaurav Mohan's house at 151 Harrison Road, and Gaurav Mohan eagerly received them. Although Abhay was a little child, his head reaching only up to the knees of the chanters, he also joined in the dancing. Shortly after this, the plague subsided. Gaurav Mohan was a pure Vaishnav, and he raised his son to be Krishna conscious. Since his own parents had also been Vaishnavas, Gaurav Mohan had never touched meat, fish, eggs, tea, or coffee. His complexion was fair, and his disposition reserved. At night, he would lock up his cloth shop, set a bowl of rice in the middle of the floor to satisfy the rats, so that they would not chew the cloth in their hunger, and return home. There, he would read from Chaitanya Charitamrita and Srimad Bhagavatam, the main scriptures of Bengali Vaishnavas, chant on his japa beads, and worship the deity of Lord Krishna. He was gentle and affectionate and would never punish Abai. Even then, obliged to correct him, Gaur Mohan would first apologize. You are my son, so now I must correct you. It's my duty. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's father would chastise him, so don't mind. Srila Prabhupada. My father's income was no more than 250 rupees, but there was no question of need. In the mango season, when we were children, we would run through the house playing, and we would grab mangoes, and we were running through. And all through the day, we would eat mangoes. We wouldn't have to think, can I have a mango? My father always provided food. Mangoes were 1 rupee a dozen. Life was simple, but there was always plenty. We were middle class, but receiving 4 or 5 guests daily. My father gave 4 daughters in marriage, and there was no difficulty for him. Maybe it was not a very luxurious life, but there was no scarcity for food or shelter or cloth. Daily he purchased 2.5 kilograms of milk. He did not like to purchase retail, but would purchase a year's supply of coal by the cartload. We were happy. Not that because we did not purchase a motor car, we were unhappy. My father used to say, God has 10 hands. If he wants to take away from you with 2 hands, how much can you protect? And when he wants to give you with 10 hands, then with your 2 hands, how much can you take? My father would rise a little late, around 7 or 8. Then after taking bath, he would go purchasing. Then from 10 o'clock to 1 in the afternoon, he was engaged in puja. Then he would take his lunch and go to business. And in the business shop, he would take a little rest for 1 hour. He would come home from business at 10 o'clock at night, and then again he would do puja. Actually, his real business was puja. For livelihood, he did some business, but puja was his main business. We would be sleeping, and father would be doing arati. Ding, ding, ding. We would hear the bell and wake up and see him bowing down before Krishna. Gaur Mohan wanted Vaishnava goals for his son. He wanted Abai to become a servant of Radharani, to become a preacher of the Bhagavatam, and to learn the devotional art of playing mridanga. He regularly received sadhus in his home, and he would always ask them, please bless my son so that Srimati Radharani may be pleased with him and grant him her blessings. Enjoying each other's company, father and son used to walk as far as 10 miles, saving the 5 paisa tram fare. On the beach, they used to see a yogi who for years had sat in one spot without moving. One day, the yogi's son was sitting there, and people had gathered around. The son was taking over his father's sitting place. Gaur Mohan gave the yogis a donation and asked their blessings for his son. When Abhay's mother said she wanted him to become a British lawyer when he grew up, which meant he would have to go to London to study, one of the Malik uncles thought it was a good idea, but Gaur Mohan would not hear of it. If Abhay went to England, he would be influenced by European dress and manners. He will learn drinking and women hunting. Gaur Mohan objected, I do not want his money. From the beginning of Abhay's life, Gaur Mohan had introduced his plan. He had hired a professional mridanga player to teach Abhay the standard rhythms for accompanying kirtan. Rajani had been skeptical. What is the purpose of teaching such a young child to play the mridanga? It's not important. But Gaur Mohan had his dream of a son who would grow up singing bhajans playing mridanga, and speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam. When Abhay sat to play the mridanga, even with his left and right arms extended as far as he could, his small hands would barely reach the drum heads at the opposite ends of the drum. With his right wrist, he would flick his hand just as his teacher instructed, and his fingers would make a high pitched sound, ti ni ta. And then he would strike the left drumhead with his open left hand, boom, boom. With practice and age, he was gradually learning the basic rhythms, and Gaur Mohan looked on with pleasure. Abhay was an acknowledged pet child of both his parents. In addition to his childhood names Moti, Landulal, Nandu, and Kocha, his grandmother called him Kachori Mukhi because of his fondness for kachoris, spicy vegetable stuffed fried pastries popular in Bengal. Both his grandmother and mother would give him kachoris, which he kept in the many pockets of his little vest. He liked to watch the vendors cooking on the busy roadside and accept kachoris from them and from the neighbors until all the inside and outside pockets of his vest were filled. Sometimes, when Abai demanded that his mother make him kachoris, she would refuse. Once, she even sent him to bed. When Gaur Mohan came home and asked, "Where is Abai?" Rajini explained how he had been too demanding and she had sent him to bed without kachoris. "No, we should make them for him," his father replied. And he woke Abhay and personally cooked puris and kachoris for him. Gaur Mohan was always lenient with Abhay and careful to see that his son got whatever he wanted. When Gaur Mohan returned home at night, it was his practice to take a little puffed rice, and Abhay would also sometimes sit with his father eating puffed rice. Once, at a cost of 6 rupees, Gaur Mohan brought Abhay a pair of shoes imported from England, and each year through a friend who traveled back and forth from Kashmir, Gaur Mohan would present his son a Kashmiri shawl with a fancy hand-sewn border. One day in the market, Abhay saw a toy gun he wanted. His father said no, and Abhay started to cry. All right, Gaur Mohan said, and he bought the gun. Then Abhay wanted another gun. "You already have one," his father said. "Why do you want another one?" "One for each hand," Abhay cried, and he lay down in the street kicking his feet. When Gaur Mohan agreed to get the second gun, Abhay was pacified. Abhay's mother Rajni was 30 years old when he was born. Like her husband, she came from a long established Gaudiya Vaishnava family. She was darker skinned than her husband, and whereas his disposition was cool, hers tended to be fiery. Abhay saw his mother and father living together peacefully. No deep marital conflict or complicated dissatisfaction ever threatened home. Rajani was chaste and religious minded, a model housewife in the traditional Vedic sense, dedicated to caring for her husband and children. Abhay observed his mother's simple and touching attempts to ensure her by prayers, by vows, and even by rituals that he continued to live. Whenever he was to go out, even to play, his mother, after dressing him, would put a drop of saliva on her finger and touch it to his forehead. Abhay never knew the significance of this act, but because she was his mother, he stood submissively like a dog with its master while she did it. Like Gaur Mohan, Rajni treated Abhay as a pet child. But whereas her husband expressed his love through leniency and plans for his son's spiritual success, she expressed hers through attempts to safeguard Abhay from all danger, disease, and death. She once offered blood from her breast to one of the demigods with the supplication that Abhay be protected on all sides from danger. At Abhay's birth, she had made a vow to eat with her left hand until the day her son would notice and ask her why she was eating with the wrong hand. One day, when the little Abai actually asked, she immediately stopped. It had been just another prescription for his survival, for she thought that by the strength of her vow, he would continue to grow, at least until he asked her about the vow. Had he not asked, she would have she would never again have eaten with her right hand, and according to her superstition, he would have gone on living protected by her vow. For his protection, she also put an iron bangle around his leg. His playmates asked him what it was, and Abai self-consciously went to his mother and demanded, "Open this bangle." When she said, "I will do it later," he began to cry. "No, now." Once Abai swallowed a watermelon seed, and his friends told him it would grow in his stomach into a watermelon. He ran to his mother, who assured him he didn't have to worry. She would say a mantra to protect him. Srila Prabhupada. Mother Yashoda would chant mantras in the morning to protect Krishna from all dangers throughout the day. When Krishna killed some demon, she thought it was due to her chanting. My mother would do a similar thing with me. His mother would often take him to the Ganges and personally bathe him. She also gave him a food supplement known as Horlicks. Wow, Horlicks has been there since then. When he got dysentery, she cured it with hot puris and fried eggplant with salt. Though sometimes when he was ill, Abhay would show his obstinacy by refusing to take any medicine. But just as he was stubborn, his mother was determined, and she would forcibly administer medicine into his mouth, though sometimes it took 3 assistants to hold him down. Okay, seems like we are pausing right now because it's close to 7 o'clock. It's just a joy to read Srila Prabhupada Leela Amrita. It just brings a different kind of joy to the heart, actually. I don't know if there's, I mean, to me, it is simply joyful to know about the activities of a pure devotee at any stage of their life. It's simply something gets awakened in the heart, a simple, pure happiness, actually. It's not like reading some story or some other random biography out there or something like that. But the pure devotees activities, anytime it actually touches the heart, that's my appreciation. And how the focus of both the parents and how Gaur Mohan, Prabhupada's father, how he had just put his foot down and said, "This is what I want for my child." And the conviction that he carried and the care that mom carried, both Prabhupada carried, actually. So that's what I feel. And the principles that we learn even from here are very precious. How whether we are young child or or a child in an adult body, what's important is to get attached to Srimad Bhagavatam and get attached to the holy name, and just try to be doing some service to the devotees of Radharani. It really feels very nice, actually. So that's all I have to say. It's just joyful. That cannot be, that feeling, nobody can beat it. It's like that. Thank you so much for arranging this reading.
Okay, anyone want to say someone's didn't chant? Okay. Vanita Mataji read, I can read. So,
Oh.
Apologies, Mata. We will see for sure for tomorrow.
Oh my God, I didn't see the message.
She's also not there.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, anyone wants to say anything? Quick. Please may be ready to say something because that's the best opportunity to say something that is good, auspicious for us. Anushamati, you are saying something? I see you unmuted. Okay, so we'll see you all tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Why it's not end? And